When my husband bought me a scarf from Maison Evelyn on our 9th wedding anniversary, I almost believed guilt could still look like love. The saleswoman wrapped the silk in black paper, smiled at him with professional warmth, and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Shaw. We have prepared your platinum client privileges for the new season." I stood there with one hand on my daughter's stroller and the other on the glass counter, hearing the sentence twice before it made sense. Platinum client. At Maison Evelyn, that meant a level of spending that turned common people into rumors. Daniel did not flinch. He only said the same thing men say when they have rehearsed a lie so many times that even the muscles in their face trust it. Client gifts, he said lightly. You know how museum donors are. I knew many things. I knew the annual gifts we bought for museum donors went through company accounts and arrived by invoice, not private purchase. I knew Daniel hated fashion, called handbags decorated pockets, and once laughed when I spent 3 days choosing a coat. Most of all, I knew that when a lie lands too quickly, it is because the speaker has been waiting for the question. Still, I smiled. Still, I took the scarf. Still, I let Emma chew on the ribbon while Daniel drove us home through a rain that silvered the windshield and made every streetlight look uncertain. 3 days later, I went to my sister Celia's loft to pick up Emma. Celia had moved back to the city 6 months earlier, claiming she wanted to restart her art career after a spiritually exhausting residency in Berlin. That was how Celia described every failed thing, spiritually exhausting, aesthetically misaligned beneath her. I had paid for that residency, of course. Just as I had paid for the first one in Florence, the summer program in Kyoto, the studio in Brooklyn, the private mentor in London, and the life she always said was only one more chance away from becoming luminous. There had always been one more chance. Emma was in the living room building a castle from velvet-covered catalog boxes. Celia, barefoot in a cream silk dress, leaned against the kitchen island with a wine glass in hand. She looked almost offended by beauty, as if beauty were a servant that had once failed her and was now desperate to make amends. "Leah," she said, glancing at the scarf around my neck. "That color is too soft for you." Then she followed my gaze and realized I had seen the cabinet. An entire wall of smoked glass shelves filled with Maison Evelyn, not 1 or 2 gifts, not even a careless handful of purchases. Rose. Scarves folded by season, belts still tagged, 3 structured bags in jewel tones, shoes in numbered boxes, and 2 evening clutches I had once paused over online before deciding Emma's preschool fees mattered more. Celia's mouth tightened by the smallest degree. "He insists on sending things," she said. The wording was wrong in a way only women understand. Not someone, not a man. He. Emma looked up from her box castle and said with the casual cruelty of children, "Aunt Celia's closet smells like Daddy's car." No one spoke. I think even the rain outside paused to listen. I turned to my sister. She did not deny it. She only lifted her glass, took a slow sip, and gave me the sort of look older sisters reserve for younger ones who are late to a lesson. For 1 second, I saw challenge there. Then pity. Then nothing at all. That evening, after I put Emma to bed, I opened every banking app Daniel had ever been too impatient to manage himself. I had set them up for him years ago because he hated technical nonsense. What men call nonsense is often the machinery of the life they expect women to keep running. The records were clean in the places meant to be seen. Donor dinners, supplier gifts, travel, reimbursements. But his private card told a more honest story. Maison Evelyn, monthly, sometimes weekly, along with a florist 2 blocks from Celia's loft, a pastry she loved, and rent for a townhouse in West Hollis under an LLC I did not recognize. I sat there until the tea beside me went cold. On another screen, our company ledger glowed with the old logic of my life. Mercer Glass Atelier, founded in a kiln district warehouse. My grandfather had left to me, grown from restoration work, and hand-blown lighting into a company museums now called when they needed beauty resurrected from fire and dust. Daniel had joined in year 2, when I still soldered broken stained glass borders by hand, and he still believed ambition could be mistaken for devotion. We built the company together, but not equally. My archive, my patents, my grandfather's furnace formulas, my land, my client relationships, those had come first before him. Yet I had spent 9 years pretending partnership meant symmetry. I let him negotiate, let him charm, let him become the public face because I was busy designing, birthing Emma, and later turning our house into the soft, bright place I thought a family deserved. Men love to call that trust. Only after betrayal do they rename it foolishness. I should say one thing clearly. Celia was not a stranger who wandered into my life and stole from me. She was my sister. When I was 16 and she was 18, our father died in a stairwell outside a construction site with dust in his lungs and a stack of unpaid bills in his jacket. My acceptance letter to architecture school arrived the same week as the funeral. Celia had just gotten into an elite private arts institute with fees that looked like ransom. My mother sat on the edge of my bed and cried the way certain women cry when they want sacrifice, not comfort. "She has a gift," she whispered. "You are practical, Leah. You can recover from delay. Your sister can't." When guilt is spoken softly enough, it begins to sound like morality. I folded my letter and took a job in my grandfather's old warehouse, cataloging salvage glass by day and learning restoration by night. Celia went to school. Then to exhibitions. Then to residencies. Then to cities where she developed new selves and returned with none of them finished. I sent money until sending money felt less like help and more like weather. My mother never called it sacrifice. She called it family. The word family can be the most elegant weapon in the language. It leaves no bruise anyone else can see. So when Celia leaned over my wedding cake 9 years ago and kissed my cheek and said, "No one deserves steadiness more than you," I believed her. And when Daniel held my hand at the altar as if it were something chosen and cherished, I believed him too. Faith is not stupidity. It is simply expensive when misplaced. The next morning, Daniel called from the office and asked why I had reviewed company expenses. I knew then that finance had told him. Or perhaps he watched the accounts more closely than I had imagined. Either answer was ugly. "Am I not allowed to review the company I built?" I asked. He exhaled into the phone and the patient, practiced way men do when they want women to sound emotional by comparison. "You're at home too much, Leah. You spiral. It is not good for you. At home too much." He meant with Emma. He meant with the school run, the meal planning, the pediatric appointments, the charity dinners he hated attending unless I prepared everything, the seasonal launches he took credit for after I designed them. He meant the invisible hours that let him appear unburdened. That afternoon, he sent peonies. The card said, "Don't let your mind wound you before the truth can reassure you." I laughed so hard I frightened myself. When flowers arrive as defense counsel, the marriage is already a courtroom. I did not confront him again. I did not scream, cry, throw glass, or call my mother. I did something far more dangerous. I became patient. I began with the house. The townhouse Daniel and I lived in sat on land my grandfather had deeded to me before I married. The structure, renovations, and interior trust had later been folded into a family holding arrangement for tax reasons, an arrangement Daniel had never read because he had never believed he would need to. Then I reviewed the corporate bylaws. Years earlier, on the advice of my grandfather's lawyer, I had created a protective clause over the design archive and kiln property. Any officer found to have used company resources for undisclosed personal relationships or to transfer archive materials outside approved channels could be removed for fiduciary breach by board vote. At the time, Daniel called the clause melodramatic. He had signed it anyway. He signed many things in those days because he still thought love meant he would never have to fear paper. Paper is patient too. I also discovered something else. The city really was preparing a heritage redevelopment proposal for the old kiln quarter. Not a rumor. Not fantasy. The district where our original warehouse stood was being considered for tax incentives, cultural grants, and restricted commercial buyback options worth millions over the next 18 months. I told Daniel nothing at first. Then, one Sunday evening while Celia was in our kitchen teaching Emma how to twist orange peels into spirals for cocktails no child should know by sight, I sighed over dinner and said, "I had a strange call from city planning." 3 pairs of eyes looked at once. Hers. His. My mother's, who had come over with a tart and the moral flexibility of a seasoned opportunist. About what? Daniel asked too quickly. I buttered my bread. The kiln quarter. They are changing the heritage use classification. It might trigger compensation and tax shelters if holdings are restructured before the year closes. Silence. Even Emma, sensing adult interest, looked from face to face with bright attention. Celia recovered first. "That sounds good," she said casually. It was the casualness of a woman leaning on a locked door while secretly listening for keys. I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe it complicates everything. If assets are not ring-fenced properly, any future dispute could drive the whole archive into review. Daniel asked what ring-fence meant. This from a man who had spent 7 years speaking at investor breakfast. I explained slowly, letting the information sound both technical and tantalizing. Marital homes, legacy IP, and personal debt exposure all mattered. So did whether management had any pending misconduct issues. So did beneficiary structure for a minor child. My mother put down her fork. "Emma should be protected," she said at once. My mother had never once before worried aloud about Emma's legal future. But greed is a kind of instant grandmother. By dessert, Daniel was already saying things like temporary paper rearrangement and best to keep the house safe for Emma anyway. Celia said very little. She only watched me the way a gambler watches a table after the deck changes. That night, Daniel touched my shoulder in bed and said, "You have been under stress. We should make things easier for you." I almost admired him. He said it in the tone of a loving husband proposing relief, not of a frightened accomplice trying to move pieces before the police arrived. "What do you suggest?" I asked. He spoke of trusts, streamlined ownership, simplified liabilities, all the language men borrow when they want to disguise hunger as responsibility. I let him talk. Then I said that if the house was truly for Emma, it should go entirely into an education and residency trust with me, as sole administrative parent until she turned 25. Daniel hesitated, only for a heartbeat. $1 million future dollars can make men sign away the roof above their present head. For now, he said. Temporarily, my mother echoed. Of course, Celia added, staring into her wine. I smiled and told them I only wanted peace. The next trap required beauty. Celia had been preparing for her return exhibition at the Halcyon Museum, a small but fashionable institution where my company had just finished restoring a turn-of-the-century glass canopy. She claimed the new series was about inheritance, fracture, and feminine resurrection. I knew the phrase because she had stolen it from my notebook. At first, I thought it was only language. Then I saw the sketches. Lines I knew too well. Curvature ratios from my grandfather's unpublished lantern forms. Color sequencing from my closed archive. Even the notches in the frame edges were based on a reinforcement system I had developed after a cathedral commission 3 winters ago. Celia had not merely stolen a man from me. She had stolen work. In some ways, that hurt more. Infidelity tells you someone thought your heart expendable. Design theft tells you they thought your mind belonged to them too. I photographed everything. Then I asked Nora, my friend since university, now a litigator with the social grace of a razor to comfort tea. Nora sat at my kitchen island, looked at the documents and said, "Do you want the fast ending or the satisfying one?" "The satisfying one," I said. She smiled. Good. I brought folders. For the next month, I lived 2 lives. In one, I was the chastened wife. I wore the Maison Aveline scarf. I accepted peonies. I allowed Daniel to kiss my forehead in front of staff. I asked Celia about her lighting temperatures and even recommended a framer. In the other life, I rebuilt my edges. I moved personal savings. I separated archive access credentials. I backed up every design file. I met with the board one member at a time. I made sure each person understood that fiduciary breach, once proven, could expose them if they remained willfully blind. Our board was small. Me, Daniel, our operations chief, an outside museum advisor, and an old family accountant who adored rules way priests adore bells. None of them liked scandal. All of them liked liability less. When I showed them private card expenditures, townhouse rents, and security logs linking Daniel's late night archive entries to Celia's exhibition progress, they grew very quiet. The accountant, Mr. Voss, adjusted his glasses and asked, "Have you confronted him?" "No."
"Why not?"
"Because men who think they are winning are easier to document." At school, Emma grew stranger with me. She had begun repeating Celia's phrases, that my clothes were functional but severe, that artists needed emotional freedom, that mothers who schedule everything make homes feel like airports. She was 9, yet already being taught a woman's softest methods of sabotage. One night while I braided her hair, she said, "Aunt Celia lets me stay up and watch old movies." She says, "Some women are born to be muses, and some are born to organize doors." I tied the ribbon too tightly. Emma winced. I loosened it immediately and stared at her small familiar head. "Did she say which one I am?" Emma shrugged. She says, "You're strong enough not to need softness." That sentence lodged in me like a nail. Strong enough not to need softness. How neatly women excuse theft from those they consider durable. As if resilience were not simply another name for repeated injuries survived in public. A week later, I found Daniel in the archive room after midnight. He said he was searching for donor files. His shirt smelled like Celia's perfume. I stood in the doorway and asked, "Do you ever miss the version of yourself who used to blush when he lied?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled sadly, almost tenderly. "You are exhausted, Leah." I think that was the moment I stopped being in love with him. Not the scarf. Not the transactions. Not even the townhouse.
That sentence.
The willingness to make my perception sound like illness because it was less inconvenient than truth. 3 days before Celia's exhibition, my mother appeared at my door with soup and a sermon. "Your sister is fragile," she said. "You always were the sturdier one." I laughed right into the steam rising from the bowl. There it was again, my lifelong punishment for surviving well. "She gave up so much," my mother continued. "Did she?" "She never had what you had. Stability. A family." I set the spoon down. "Mother, I paid for half her life." "She never asked you to," my mother said reflexively. The lie came out so fast it barely wore clothes. "No," I said. "You asked?" My mother pressed her lips together. To hear an old script spoken back to its author is sometimes more humiliating than being exposed. She left soon after, but not before telling me I should not destroy my child's world over adult mistakes. As if my child's world were not already being poisoned from the inside. The morning of the Halcyon Gala arrived clear and brittle. I wore black. Not mourning black. Disciplined black. The kind of black women wear when they want their faces to remain the brightest weapon in the room. Celia arrived at the museum in silver satin, accompanied by Daniel. They did not walk arm in arm, but they moved with the unconscious synchronization of people whose bodies had stopped asking permission. Several donors noticed. Several more pretended not to. Her exhibition was beautiful. That is what infuriated me most. Not because she had made beauty from nothing, but because she had made it from me. From my lines, my archive, my inheritance, my labor transmuted into her narrative of wounded rebirth. The first speech belonged to the museum director, the second to Celia. By the 3rd minute of her remarks, she had already thanked those who understand that true art comes from the courage to begin again after life has wronged you. Daniel stood near the front, watching her as if repentance had finally found a face. When the applause ended, I stepped forward before the director could reclaim the podium. The room shifted. 100 well-dressed instincts recognized the scent of unscheduled ruin. "I'm sorry," I said pleasantly. "Before anyone buys, promotes, or underwrites this collection, there is a provenance matter to clarify." Celia's smile held. "Barely." "Leah," she said into the microphone. "Not tonight." "Especially tonight," I answered. Then I nodded to Nora, who stood near the side entrance with 2 assistants and 3 document boxes. Nora handed the museum director a packet. Licensing history, archive photographs, date stamped design notebooks, security logs, side-by-side overlays showing that 6 major pieces in Celia's exhibition were derivative works based on unpublished immersive glass archive material, protected under corporate and state law. The director read page 1 and went white. Daniel moved toward me. "Mr. Voss moved faster and intercepted him with the calm of a man who had balanced disaster into line items. "Don't," he said quietly. "Nothing is more frightening than courtesy when backed by evidence." The donors began murmuring. One collector put down her champagne and took 3 literal steps away from the display she had been praising 5 minutes earlier. Another asked whether the insurance declarations were still valid. A third, who cared only about scandal, discreetly opened his phone. Celia finally lost control of her face. "This is spite," she hissed. "No," I said. "Spite would have been waiting until the sale closed and then having your buyers sue you instead." She actually slapped me. It stung less than expected. Humiliation is clumsy when delivered by the unoriginal. I did not touch her back. I looked at the director and said, "For the museum's sake, I recommend immediate suspension of the event pending legal review." Then I looked at Daniel. "For the company's sake, I recommend the same." He stared at me as if the world had performed a personal betrayal by allowing me intelligence. "Leah." That was all he said.
"My name?"
No explanation, no apology. Men always want one small human word to carry the weight of a bridge they themselves burned. I stepped closer so only he could hear. "You should go check your email." He did. On his screen were the board vote minutes removing him as operating officer, pending investigation for fiduciary breach, misuse of resources, and unauthorized archive access. Attached was a demand to surrender all company credentials within the hour. He looked up at me with something like awe, then hatred, then panic. Behind him, Celia had begun shouting that the museum was humiliating a woman for making difficult art. No one listened. Nothing dates faster than self-mythology in the presence of paperwork. The next morning, every culture page in the city had a version of the story. Rising artist accused of exhibiting protected designs. Museum suspend show. Husband of company founder implicated in internal breach. Social media did the rest, which is to say it took a bonfire and discovered fresh uses for wind. Celia posted a long statement about male systems pitting women against one another. Nora sent a cease and desist before breakfast. Daniel did not post anything. Instead, he came to the house at dawn and sat in the driveway for an hour before finally ringing the bell. I met him in the front hall. He looked as if he had aged 10 years overnight, which pleased me less than I expected. Misery becomes less satisfying when you once loved its face. I made mistakes, he said. The phrase was so small it insulted the room. Mistakes are forgetting anniversaries, I replied. Mistakes are breaking a bowl. Renting a townhouse for my sister and draining company resources into her closet is not a mistake. It is a plan. He flinched at the word sister. Good. I wanted the blood relation to hurt. He asked whether this had to become war. I told him it already had. He said he loved me. I asked whether he loved me the day he bought Celia the emerald bag or the day he told her my designs bored him unless they looked like her. His face emptied. I had read the messages. All of them. He sat down hard on the hall bench, as if his knees no longer trusted the floor. There are things you do not understand. Try me. He did not. Cohorts who call themselves complicated always hope mystery will look nobler than selfishness. Instead, he said, Celia needed help. And I did not. You were always stronger. There it was again. The anthem of parasites. You are strong, therefore I may feed. I laughed, but something inside me shook loose. Daniel, do you know what strong people learn first? Locks? Then I handed him a folder. Inside were divorce papers, financial disclosures, and a draft settlement that offered him less than he believed possible, but more than he would receive if litigation exposed the full scope of his misconduct and personal expenditures. He stared at the numbers. You would take the house. The house is already in Emma's trust. His head jerked up. I almost smiled. He had forgotten what he signed in his eagerness to secure imaginary redevelopment windfalls. He also learned that the archive was untouchable. The original Kill land remained under the family trust, and the future heritage compensation, if and when it arrived, could only benefit compliant beneficiaries and uncontested stewardship structures. He no longer qualified as either. The word qualifying ruined him more than adultery ever could. When he left, he did not slam the door. He looked back once, like a man who had finally understood that the building he meant to rob had been his shelter too. I will admit there was tragedy in that. But tragedy does not absolve theft. Celia called that evening from a number I did not know. When I answered, she said without greeting, You always loved winning more than loving people. I sat in Emma's empty room, surrounded by stuffed animals she had left at my sister's loft after another manipulated sleepover, and felt almost amused. Celia, if you want immorality, you should not enter through my marriage. She said I had never understood what it meant to want beauty desperately enough to break rules for it. I told her beauty built on theft was just envy with framing lights. Then, I hung up. Some people deserve a final word. Sisters like mine deserve dial tone. The problem, however, was Emma. When I went to collect her, she hid behind Celia and refused to come home. Aunt Celia says you embarrass people when you're angry, she said. She was 9. 9, and already handed language sharpened for adult wars. I knelt so we were eye level. Did Aunt Celia also tell you she borrowed Daddy? Emma's face changed. Children do not understand marriage, but they understand stealing. Before she could answer, Celia stepped between us and said, Don't involve her. I should have kept my voice level. Instead I said, You already did. Emma began to cry. She shouted, Why can't Aunt Celia live with us instead? She makes everything fun. The sentence hit me exactly where Daniel's had not. Perhaps because children do not know how to lie elegantly, only directly. I took Emma home anyway. She would not hold my hand in the car. That night she told me she wanted to stay with her father until I stopped ruining things. I let her. Sometimes love requires allowing your child to discover who is using her. Sometimes any tighter grip becomes the villain's story about you. My mother came the following morning, not to comfort me, but to negotiate. She said Celia was falling apart. She said artists were fragile. She said Daniel had been unfairly cornered and that public disgrace could break a person's future. I asked which person she meant. She did not answer. Then she said the thing she had likely rehearsed in the mirror. Love cannot be forced. I stared at her. 9 words, 9 years erased into philosophy. I wondered whether she had said it to herself the first time she asked me to give up school for Celia. You're right, I said. I won't force anything. Relief spread across her face so quickly, I nearly pitied her for being so easy to read. I will let them have each other, I continued. Completely. Only then did she realize the sentence had teeth. By then Daniel had moved into the West Hollis townhouse, publicly to create space. Celia appeared with him in 2 restaurant photos and 1 grainy image outside a gallery in a coat I had once given her for Christmas. The comments were vicious. Apparently betrayal becomes more offensive to strangers when the women involved are sisters and the man looks expensive while denying everything. Daniel's lawyer requested discretion, nor I requested documentation. We gave each other what we were good at. Soon we had more than enough. Not just the affair, but receipts showing corporate fuel charges for personal travel, storage fees for Celia's materials hidden as installation costs, and 3 wire transfers routed through a vendor account to cover the townhouse deposit. Meanwhile, Daniel's parents had done exactly what greedier elders always do. Believing a heritage windfall was imminent, they had leveraged a logistics company to fund Celia's new gallery front, a bridge loan, and a speculative purchase of a suburban live work property they hoped Daniel and Celia could later grow into. Debt built on fantasy is a fast-burning house. When the city finally released its preliminary redevelopment map, the eligible parcels were all there. So were the conditions. Debt exposure, stewardship history, and unresolved litigation disqualified several applicants. Daniel's father called me before noon, voice shaking with rage, asking why his company was flagged. I told him calmly that perhaps banks disliked misrepresentation. He shouted that I had trapped him. I corrected him. No. I informed you, and you ran. There is a difference between a trap and a cliff people mistake for a shortcut. He threatened to sue. I welcomed the idea. Then, Nora sent over the settlement demand for Daniel's personal divorce case and a separate notice of potential corporate fraud liability. He did not sue. A week later, Emma called at 11:43 p. M. She was crying. I knew before she spoke. Aunt Celia said I can't sleep in her room anymore, she whispered. Apparently Emma had overheard Celia telling a friend that the child has become clingy and that Daniel needs to choose whether he wants a daughter or a second adolescence. I got into the car in my slippers. When I rang the townhouse bell, Daniel opened the door looking more defeated than angry. Emma ran straight past him and wrapped herself around my waist so hard I had to brace against the frame. Over her head, I saw Celia at the end of the hall, beautiful and furious and suddenly older. Take her, Celia said. As if she were ever mine to take from you, I answered. Daniel tried to apologize. He had become an apology factory by then, manufacturing regret in industrial quantities with no corresponding product. I took Emma home and turned off my phone. The next months were ugly in the administrative way human collapse usually is. School reports, temporary custody schedules, forensic accounting, valuation conferences, deposition dates. Through all of it, I kept working. Design saved me because design required proportion, and proportion is impossible when you're weeping. I moved back into the original warehouse for a time, into the loft apartment above the furnace room where I had lived before marriage. The walls smelled faintly of lime dust and hot metal. At night, the city outside sounded nothing like domestic life. No cartoons, no video game jingles, no Daniel asking where the charger had gone. I slept better than I expected. Emma began seeing a child therapist. At first she said little. Then one afternoon, she asked if it was true that Dad had loved Aunt Celia first. I told her this. Adults can fail each other in old ways that have nothing to do with children. It was the gentlest truth I could manage. She cried anyway. Daniel, to his partial credit, did not fight therapy, nor did he forbid her from speaking. He did, however, continue trying to paint himself as confused rather than corrupt. Confusion is the favorite costume of selfish men after consequences arrive. It looked softer in court. Celia's gallery opened for exactly 11 days. Collectors hesitated. One installation partner withdrew, a magazine postponed a feature. Then a private lender called his note early after seeing her name connected to ongoing intellectual property disputes, and one viral thread titled, She stole her sister's husband and her chandelier designs. Cruel, yes. Also not inaccurate. My mother rang me in tears and begged me to stop feeding the fire. I asked how exactly she imagined the fire had been lit. She accused me of vengeance. I told her vengeance would have been silenced until after Celia signed long-term loans. Actually, that was not true. That would have been strategy. Vengeance would still come later. In the first mediation session, Daniel said he wanted an amicable reset. Nora asked whether that included repaying company misuse, relinquishing claims to archive-related growth, and accepting a parenting arrangement consistent with the child's current residence and its unstable housing. He looked at me as if I had coached cruelty into her. I had only hired accuracy. The mediator, an exhausted former judge with the eyes of a saint who had seen too much tax law, suggested compromise. I offered one. Daniel could keep a reduced percentage from his vested profit share, and one classic card if he waived everything else, acknowledged his use of resources, and agreed not to involve Emma in any adult dispute or cohabitation transition for 6 months. He asked for more. Men always do. Then Celia sent him a message mid-session. I knew because I saw his eyes drop and his spine harden. Some women do not whisper into men's ears. They text into their insecurity. He rejected the offer. So we went to court. Litigation is not glamorous. It is waiting in expensive rooms while strangers mispronounce the worst years of your life. It is hearing a man who once kissed your shoulder before sleep say under oath that your emotional instability contributed to marital distance. I almost thanked him. Nothing helps a woman in family court like a husband who confuses arrogance with strategy. Nora introduced bank records, corporate reimbursements, archive messages, and signed house documents treated as temporary. The judge listened, expressionless. User, Boss testified in direct time and one data, which made the details more devastating. 13 unauthorized reimbursements. 2 falsified installation memos. Repeated archive access after hours. Personal housing costs disguised through vendor pathways. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue that the townhouse was intended for donor entertainment. Nora raised one brow and produced delivery records for monogram sheets, private wine club fees, and a silk robe embroidered C. Even the judge looked bored by the explanation that followed. Adultery is tedious when supported by invoices. Celia was called in later on the IP case and wore white, which I found funny. Her testimony was all injured dignity. She claimed inspiration, misunderstanding, collaborative memory. Then Nora showed 3 progress photos, timestamped before Celia had ever entered the archive room. Next to a message where Daniel wrote, she never noticed old design folders missing for a day. Celia stopped looking no after that. The legal end came out with thunder, but with signatures. Daniel lost his officer role permanently, sold his car, and accepted settlement far closer to my first offer than to the grand future he imagined beside Celia. The house remained Emma's trust. The archive, kiln land, and redevelopment rights stayed with me. The court noted his misuse of marital and corporate assets. That mattered. Celia left the gallery in the middle of winter. Not elegantly. Not with a retrospective. With 2 assistants carrying unsold pieces into a hired van while rain started to mascara and the landlord's representative changed the lock. I watched from across the street with Nora and felt nothing at first. Then relief, immense and simple, like a heavy wet coat, finally sliding from the shoulders. My mother did not speak to me for 3 months. Then she sent a message on my birthday. Whatever happened, you are still my daughter. I stared at it for a long time before realizing what hurt. Not the sentence itself. The fact that she thought it generous, as though daughter were a title she granted when pleased. I replied then, learn how daughters should be loved. She never answered. Some silences are punishments. Others are vacant rooms after the furniture has been removed. This one was the second kind. Emma adjusted slowly. Children are resilient, which means they keep growing around damage until adults finally notice the shape. She stopped asking for Celia within 2 months. She still saw Daniel according to schedule, but the hero worship was gone. In its place came caution. One evening, while we were painting sample boards in the studio, she asked, did Aunt Celia want me, or did she just want what I proved she could take? I put my brush down. There are questions children should never have reason to invent. I think I said carefully, she liked winning more than loving. Emma nodded as if that matched a private suspicion. Then she asked for more cobalt blue. A year after the gala, the city confirmed phase 1 heritage funding for the kiln quarter. Because the trust had remained compliant and the archive stewardship was intact, Mercer Glass received restoration priority status, tax relief, and a partnership offer for the district visitor center. The newspapers called it a triumphant return. I called it paperwork, finally paying rent. Daniel wrote once after that, a real letter on paper. He said he was living in a smaller place now, consulting for a logistics broker and trying to become someone Emma could respect without having to forgive too much. It was the most honest sentence I had ever received from him. I showed it to Nora, who said honesty after ruin was still honesty just late. Celia did not write. I heard about her through the city's elegant gossip chain. A failed collaboration in Lisbon. A patron who withdrew support. A man in Brussels. A period of deep retreat. Women like Celia are always said to be in retreat when what they really are is uninvited. Once though, I saw her myself. At a design fair in autumn, standing alone in front of a display of recycled glass vessels she had clearly not made. She looked thinner, sharper, more ordinary. She saw me too. For a second I wondered whether she would apologize. Instead she said, you got everything. I considered the sentence. My marriage? No. My child's uncomplicated trust? No. My 20s? Certainly not. What I got eventually was what remained after theft met consequence. I kept what was mine, I said. That is not the same thing. She laughed once, a dry broken sound. You always did care about ownership. No, I said. I learned to... Then I walked away. Closure is overrated. Distance is more practical. There is one image I return to often. Not the cabinet of luxury goods. Not the museum gala. Not even the court. It is a simple one. Me, 16 years old, standing in my grandfather's dusty warehouse with a rolled up architecture letter in my pocket, believing sacrifice automatically makes people careful with what you give them. I wish I could go back and tell that girl one thing. Not to become harder. Not to love less. Only this. If someone calls you strong as a reason to take more from you, they are not praising you. They are measuring what they can carry away. Years later, when journalists asked how I had stayed so calm while my husband and sister challenged me, I nearly laughed. Challenged me? No. They mistook my stillness for weakness. That is different. Plenty of women look quiet just before the floor gives way under other people. I was never calm because I did not feel pain. I was calm because screaming would not have transferred a deed, protected a trust, frozen an account, or preserved my daughter's future. Rage is pure fuel, but paperwork is the engine. Once I understood that, the rest was timing. The old house where Daniel and I once lived is now rented to a visiting curator and her husband, 2 considerate people who send Emma postcards when they travel. The kitchen no longer smells like our life. Good. Some rooms deserve reincarnation more than memory. As for the Maison Aveline scarf, I kept it. Not because it meant love, because it reminds me that evidence often arrives dressed as insult. Sometimes the first gift of betrayal is finally seeing the price tag on a lie. Emma is 11 now. She spends Saturdays in the hot shop wearing protective goggles and bossing apprentices twice her size. When people ask whether she wants to be an artist, she says, no. I want to own the building artists need. Then she grins at me. I pretend to look shocked. Inside I glow. Last winter, she found one of my old architecture sketchbooks and asked why I never went to school for it. I told her the short version. Later, she came back with a pencil and wrote on the inside cover, you can still build. Children are clumsy prophets, but prophets all the same. So I did. Not cathedrals. Not towers. A new studio wing, mostly. Steel. Reclaimed brick. Long skylights. The sort of space a younger version of me would consider impossible. At the opening, I invited students from 3 public schools and 1 scholarship program for girls in technical design. No speeches. Just doors. Toward the end of the evening, Nora raised a glass and asked whether I ever regretted not destroying Daniel more completely when I had the chance. I thought about it seriously. There is a dark satisfaction in imagining total ruin. Then I looked at the furnace glow on the new windows and shook my head.
Empty-handed is enough, I said.
What do you mean? They wanted to leave me with nothing, I told her.
So I made sure they were the ones who learned how cold nothing feels. Nora nodded, because she is one of the few people I know who respects restraint when it is deliberate. If there is a moral here, it is not that patient women always win. Many do not. It is not that family betrayers inevitably fall. Some land softly, and it is certainly not that love is foolish. Love built my life as much as betrayal burned parts of it. The moral is simpler and harsher. Never let anyone tell you your softness excuses their cruelty. Never let your labor become invisible just because you stop denouncing it. Never confuse being needed with being valued. And never ever hand your archive to people who only admire what they can steal. I still think about the child I almost had with Daniel. The second one we once discussed in paint stores and grocery aisles and soft lamplight conversations before I understood how much of him was already elsewhere. Some griefs do not leave. They change rooms inside you. I have learned to live in the rest of the house, sometimes very late when the kiln is cooling and the city seems held together by nothing but reflected windows and sleepless traffic. I wonder whether Daniel loved me at all. Then I stop. The answer matters less than it used to. Love that protects only itself is not a language I wish to translate anymore. I know this instead. I loved honestly. I built with clean hands. I paid in years, money, trust, and work. When the reckoning came, I did not beg for dignity. I documented, negotiated, and kept walking. That counts for more than being adored by the wrong people ever could. The season Celia lost the gallery, a mutual acquaintance told me she had said I was incapable of mercy. Perhaps. Or perhaps she had mistaken mercy for permission. I had given her permission all my life. Money, time, space, excuses, silence. What I withheld finally was access. And access is everything. Access to your mind, to your house, to your child, to the little daily tendernesses that make up a life. Once revoked, the thief calls you cruel. Let her. Doors are not insults. They are architecture. Sometimes women write to me now. Not many, but enough. They say they recognize themselves somewhere in the story. Maybe in the company books, maybe in the family guilt, maybe in the moment a child repeated another woman's words with your own voice, nowhere inside them. They ask what to do first. Always first. I tell them, copy everything. Not because proof heals.
It does not.
But because truth deserves paperwork before it meets performance. After that, eat. Sleep if you can. Tell one person who does not profit from your confusion. And when the time comes, choose the ending that leaves you able to live with your own face. I can live with mine now, even on mornings when old anger wakes before I do. Even on birthdays. Even when I pass the boutique window and see silk arranged under strategic light. Especially then. Because now I know displays are built by hands behind the glass, and I know exactly what mine can make. The last time Daniel saw the new studio, he stood outside the gate after dropping Emma off and asked if he could look around. I thought about refusing. Instead, I let him in. He walked slowly, reading wall plaques, pausing at the archive room doors, the new drafting tables, the apprentice racks. At the skylit end of the main hall, he stopped. You did build, he said quietly. Emma, carrying 2 sample rods, rolled her eyes and muttered, obviously. I almost laughed. Daniel smiled at her, then at me, not asking for anything at all. That, more than any apology, told me the old hunger had finally burned out. When he left, he did so empty-handed. No keys, no claims, no narrative in which he had been misunderstood into innocence. Just a coat, his car, and a daughter who would see him next weekend if he arrived on time. It was, in the end, more mercy than he had earned and less than he had once expected. As for Celia, I heard she moved again. Somewhere coastal. Somewhere full of artists and reinvention and people willing to believe a new story if told under flattering light. Maybe she will rise there for a while. Maybe she already has. It no longer concerns me. There are women who think winning means watching another woman crawl.
I used to think so too during the hottest hour of my rage.
But real victory turned out to be stranger and steadier. It was eating breakfast in peace, signing school forms without dread, answering my own door, and knowing exactly who belonged beyond it. I do not bless what happened. I do not think betrayal for lessons.
There are cheaper teachers.
But I no longer fear the version of myself who walked out of that boutique holding a silk scarf and the first thread of a ruin. She was not stupid. She was early, and when the rest arrived, she did not look away. So yes, the green tea girl wanted to fight me. The sister wanted to take my place. The husband wanted the warmth of my home and the thrill of her mirror. They wanted me compliant, ashamed, unsure, eager to preserve appearances, even if it meant walking away with nothing. Instead, I let them keep reaching until their own hands closed on air. When people ask for a neat ending, I tell them this: I did not get neat. I got true, and true is better. True does not always sparkle in time for photographs, but it holds. Like lead lines in old stained glass, like signatures on the right paper, like a child finally learning who keeps her safe. Tonight, the studio is quiet. Emma is asleep upstairs with graphite on her fingers. The furnace is low. A draft from the new wing moves through the hall and stirs the edge of the Maison Aveline scarf, hanging from a peg beside my desk. I keep meaning to store it away. I never do. It hangs there like a flag from a conquered country. Not his country. Not my sister's. Mine. Because the day he bought it, he thought it was evidence of how little I understood. Now it is evidence of how much I eventually did. There is a certain elegance in repurposing insults as inventory. And if someday Emma asks me how I survived the year her father and Aunt tried to turn my own life into a corridor I was expected to leave through quietly, I will tell her the truth. I did not survive by being nicer. I survived by being clearer. I named what was mine. I counted what was taken. I stopped negotiating with people who called theft destiny. Then maybe, if she is old enough, I will show her the folders, the bank records, the trust documents, the cease and desist with coffee stains on the corner, the board minutes. Not because I want her to worship revenge. Because I want her to understand that dignity can be drafted, defended, and signed into enforceable form. Some people leave marriages with furniture. Some with pets. Some with debt and insomnia and a taste of humiliation at the back of the throat. I left with my name, my work, my daughter, my future acreage, and the exact knowledge of who had been pretending all along. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. So if you ever see a woman standing very still while others celebrate too loudly around her, do not assume she is lost. Sometimes stillness is only calculation made beautiful. Sometimes silence is a ledger closing. Sometimes the hand not reaching for the glass is the same hand that already holds the deed. And sometimes after a long enough performance, all a patient woman has to do is step aside. Then the ones who meant to strip her bare will keep running forward under the weight of borrowed glamour, borrowed language, borrowed love, until they realize there is nothing left beneath them.
No archive.
No house. No board seat. No daughter's trust. No future paid for by her ignorance.
Only debt. Only exposure. Only each other, which for people like them is the most punishing poverty of all.